Well, good morning, Pastor Catalin. Thank you so much for being on the podcast this morning. I'm so excited to have you uh, on and to hear some of your stories. Full transparency, you're actually the first pastor I've talked to who has actually crossed the border and gone into Ukraine, and so I'm excited to hear how the church is operating, obviously, in a very demanding time, very strategic time, and also a very dangerous time. So, but before we dive into any of that, I thought we would just start the podcast by you sharing a little bit about yourself. Tell me where you're at, how you got started in ministry, and your church.
Thank you. So, good morning to you. Good afternoon to us, Sean. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. Greetings to your listeners and to your viewers. My name is Catalin Croitor. I was born in Romania 47 years ago, in communist Romania at the time, and I'm currently a pastor. Um, I pastor two churches here in the northern part of Romania, in the region of Suceava, and at the same time, I oversee the ministry in around 80 Baptist churches in our regional Baptist association. So, yes, that's me. I'm married to Paula. Um, we are serving together the Lord in church, and as well as that in other areas. One of them being, as you have mentioned already, um, this crisis that there is in Ukraine at the moment. So we'll be talking about that soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something interesting there. You said you were born and into Romania when it was under communist rule, and I've talked to a couple of other pastors who have shared that and shared stories that their parents and grandparents had told them of how this has triggered some memories. Um, from one pastor I talked to the other last week said we never thought this something like this could ever happen again. We felt like we were too, we're civilized countries now, and they were quite shocked. And so leading up to the 24th of February, when of course, unfortunately, this went down, what was your mindset as you're starting to see, obviously you're in Romania, but you're still very close to the border. You're starting to see the Russian troops amass along the border. What was going on in your mind? Were you thinking, this is nothing's going to happen, or were you thinking, oh, something's going to happen here?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm not a person who panics very easily and very quickly. Um, but even so, I was very curious and concerned about what was happening in Ukraine. And I suppose when I first heard that the war has started, uh, I first thought about the people over there, the children, and those who uh, are vulnerable and who are going to be affected sooner or later by this war. Now, did I think about us as Romanians? Not really. I didn't think that we will be affected. That the war will include us as well. My personal thought was for the people of Ukraine and how we can help,
Mhm.
how we can get involved. I remember mobilizing our churches to pray for the situation in Ukraine. But because by that time I had already received some emails from some Ukrainian pastors who were foreseeing somehow the events and were asking me and other pastors if, in case of emergency, in case of a need, could we um, receive refugees in our churches. So that was very new to me because, as I said, we have been praying for Ukraine, but never thought that the Lord will answer those prayers by using us uh, to welcome and to shelter refugees from Ukraine. So that was when I started to share with my churches the same thoughts that I've just shared with you. And I said, listen, it's good that we are praying, but what if the Lord is calling us to practically get involved in this? What if
Right.
Ukrainians will be flooding into Romania? What if we have to open up our homes to host them? So that was the beginning, and as you all know, that actually happened.
Right. And as I think about those first few days and some of the stories that I've heard, of course, the flood or the surge of refugees hitting the border, and of course Poland and Romania and Moldova taking a lot of those folks in. Um, I know that in a lot of ways it put a tax on the church. It put a tax on it put some strain and stress. Um, because as you just said, a lot of folks weren't, they were praying, they were thinking, okay, well, maybe, but when it became real, people had to take quick action. I was, again, I heard a story of a pastor who uh, was called that on in the afternoon and was said, "Hey, can you take in some guests?" And he said, "Sure, yeah, we can help with a few. We don't have a lot. We're not really set up for that, but we'll do it. Of course, we'll do whatever we can." And literally within 24 hours, he had, I think, 20, 30 guests at his church, and he said he just couldn't believe how quickly people were coming across. But something else you said there, you said. Uh, it's amazing how God can use us in times of war and in times of stress to still continue to share his message of love, to tangibly, you know, to be able to tangibly share with someone. And it seems like when you tangibly help someone, it opens the door for ministry. Have you seen that happening in your churches, and as you're talking with your guests, where as you help, as you provide the necessary resources they need to lead or to live, that it's opening that door for ministry?
Very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
So when you make yourself available to the Lord, He has plenty for you to do. He has plenty for you to do. So as a pastor, I have to confess that over the last 2 months, my life and my ministry has been very, very demanding, very busy, to the point um, that I felt very often quite overwhelmed by the needs, by the ministry that it was available for us to do, um, and by the projects, actions, and activities that we are involved and still are involved. So yes, when you make yourself available to the Lord, He gives you uh, the ministry to do, but also talking about being overwhelmed, He provides the resources. He helps us along the way. So if it hasn't been for the grace of God and for His help, we wouldn't have been able to do to what we've done so far.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I know that so many of probably your staff and yourself and others are working quite literally around the clock trying to help figure out, you know, logistics and how to move stuff across the border. Let's talk about that a little. So as I said earlier, a lot of our pastors are taking in guests in their churches or in their homes or really any place they can find. Um, you, on the other hand, have not only been doing that, but you've been going across the border. You've been taking supplies into Ukraine. Uh, Tell me a little bit about that journey. What is that journey like when you load up your sprinter or your van or whatever you're taking over there, and you're carrying a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not like you're just carrying a couple of grocery bags. You're loaded up with thousands of pounds of. From what I've seen, it looks like thousands of pounds of food and supplies, and you're running it across the border. What is that process like, and where are you ultimately taking those supplies to in Ukraine without obviously being too descriptive, but in general, where are you taking those supplies?
Mhm. Sure. But before I share with you what you've just asked, let me say what we have been doing here in our area within our churches shortly, and then we'll get back to the discussion that you um, asked me to have. So, of course, this war has taken all of us by surprise, and we are not ready for what we had to do. But very quickly, we were able to get organized and to convert some of our church buildings into refugee shelters. We welcomed them in. We went to the border. We welcomed them into our country, took them to our shelters, looked after them, fed them, met their needs, ministered to them, prayed with and for them, shared the gospel with them, and also helped some of them to reach their final destinations in Europe or in some other places. Uh, but as well as that, we were aware that the most needy and the most vulnerable Ukrainians were still in Ukraine. Uh, we've discovered that those who were able to cross the border into Romania were those who were, first of all, physically able to do so. They were healthy enough to do so, to travel, and also perhaps they were financially able to do so because all this travel includes costs and money and finance. So we soon discovered that those who stayed in Ukraine, either by their choice or because they had no choice, were actually uh, much needier or in much more need than the ones who have come across. Um, these ones that have come to us, at least now they were in a safe place. Uh, they were looked after. They were away from the war zone. But those who have stayed in Ukraine were still in danger, were still in need, and that is when we decided to cross the border and to help those who are over there. So we started to make appeals around our churches for special offerings, donations, in order to buy humanitarian aid,
Mhm.
and then to take this aid into Ukraine. It's a long process. It's complex and complicated, but what I can share with you is that the Lord has provided. People have been so supportive. Uh, Even the Romanian people were amazed of themselves, of how generous and sacrificially giving we have become overnight. Um, and then to see people like yourself, your wife, and churches from across the world stepping in, not only by praying but practically supporting and sending funds to cover for fuel, for a van, for a driver, to buy these supplies. Um, which at the beginning we understood that they had to be beds, mattresses, generators, washing machines, things that churches in Ukraine needed in order to provide and to meet the needs of the Ukrainian refugees. Lately, we have been told that what they need over there is food,
Mhm.
medicine, and money. So over the last couple of weeks, we've focused on sending out these things. So we go to a supermarket or we ask people from our churches to give food, medicine. We store it in our church. Then, when we have a full load for a van, we load the van, go to the border, cross the border, and we go to the first big place in Ukraine, which is closest to us, and this is a town called Chernivtsi. There are many evangelical churches in Chernivtsi, and they themselves have thousands of refugees.
Mm.
So we provide food and medicine for those refugees. But at the same time, the pastors of these evangelical churches in Chernivtsi take our humanitarian aid, our food supplies, into the war zone. They take their vans and drive near Kiev, even further, to help those churches and those areas who need help.
Well, I want to talk about one of the videos that I saw that I believe you sent over, and I think you had just pulled up in your van and you guys were unloading. You kind of had a little chain of people going and unloading stuff. And what is the reception of from the Ukrainians? I mean, obviously, um, they're grateful, but uh, are they are they surprised to see the outpouring of support that they're receiving from their neighboring countries, or was it kind of expected? I mean, what are you what is your sense when you're actually distributing those supplies?
I think at the moment they are not surprised anymore. They are impressed and thankful and very grateful, but not surprised anymore. They were surprised at the beginning. Um, I saw that on the faces of those refugees coming into Romania, being received with such warmth and love and friendship and solidarity. And I've seen that on the faces of the pastors and the refugees in Ukraine, who for the first time received huge amounts of humanitarian aid, food supplies, funds, and everything they needed. I think this is the reaction that any of any one of us would have when we are helped by people that we have never met from unexpected sources. Um, so yes, there was great surprise, great thankfulness, gratitude, and even when we crossed the border, uh, before this war started, crossing the border for Romanians was quite difficult. I've been going to Ukraine a lot in the past, preaching in the Romanian churches in Ukraine, and I could sense that the customs and the soldiers were not very helpful in letting us go through. But I've noticed this time, uh, with them knowing that we are coming to help physically, practically, with food, with funds, with anything, they are more cooperative, more welcoming,
Mhm.
and understandably so. And when we came back from Ukraine, crossing the border into Romania, they tell us, "Thank you for coming. Please come again. You're welcome again." Uh, Something that prior to this war we've never heard before.
Wow. So they're understanding that you're there to help. You're not there to harm. I'm sure there's a lot of. I was talking to a pastor down in Glotz,
Uh-huh.
and he was
Yeah.
mentioning that they were seeing concern with unfortunately some of the unsavory things that come along with war, trafficking, things like that. And so he was mentioning that um, you know, rightfully so, people have to be careful, right? I mean, we want people to be safe. We want people to be taken care of. And so you can understand why they would be why the border guards would be that way. But it's interesting now that they know you, now that they sense that you're not there to cause harm, you're there to help. That they're kind of opening those borders a little easier. And that leads me to a question, though. So, in one of the videos that you sent in, for those listeners right now, if you go up to servinghim uh, .org, you can see some of the videos that Pastor Catalin has sent over, and they're absolutely incredible. So, I would highly encourage you go check those out. Um, there was a video that you sent that had looked like a convoy of semi trucks, and so obviously a lot of people who here in the United States who are giving donations, who are are trying to help any way they can. Um, they know that a lot of that's going towards those kind of aid efforts and those kind of relief efforts and those kind of supplies. Tell me a little bit about the trucks. What kind of situation are they running into when they get to the border? The larger semi trucks.
Hmm. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't know too much about those trucks. I saw them there. I videoed them. I tried to engage with some drivers of those trucks to ask what they're doing, what they're transporting. Unfortunately, most of them were either Ukrainian-speaking drivers or Turkish-speaking drivers, but I did manage to understand eventually that they were transporting either fuel uh, or gas, uh, one of these two. Uh, could have been something more as well than that. But those trucks were not sent by us or by our churches. They were sent by companies, I guess.
Okay.
Um, and I think for them, for those trucks, it's much more difficult to cross the border. As you could see, and as you will see from those videos, there are miles and miles of trucks, and that means that it will take them a couple of days to cross the border. So that's why we, as a Christian organization and as churches, we we use vans instead of trucks. Vans are much easier um, to get across the border. We don't have to wait for so long. Uh, to wait 3 days to get across and 3 more days to come back. It's a
Right.
long time. So vans, it takes us only uh, half an hour to cross the border one way, and probably 1 or 2 hours to cross the border uh, back into the country. So that's all I can say about those
Okay.
trucks.
Well, I appreciate that. And a couple other quick questions for you. Um, are you guys still seeing a surge uh, of refugees coming across, or has that pretty much kind of stopped for the time being? I mean, obviously, we woke up to headlines this morning. It's Monday, the 6th of June. We woke up to headlines here in the United States that the Capitol was under attack again and had lost one of their uh, strongholds of sorts. I'm unfamiliar with the Capitol and how it lays out specifically, but there was obviously some concern about that. Of course, we've heard about the Donbass region, and that's pretty. Of course, that's way east, but understanding that that's taken on quite the toll. Um,
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing refugees still come across, or do you expect to see a surge again, or do you feel like it's now just trying to work with supplies and those who have come across have come across?
Okay, that's a good question. So, at the very beginning, we all know that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of refugees coming every day. After a month or so, the refugees um, were not in as big numbers as they used to be at the beginning. And that was good. That was good because that was an answer to our prayer. We wanted those refugees to stay at home with their families, although we were looking forward to welcoming them in our refugee centers. We wanted to minister to them, to serve them, to help them. So we were at the border expecting them, and when we saw that their numbers started to drop, we felt a little bit um, sorry and disappointed. But as I said, we rejoiced because that meant that they were safe at home in their country. So they were able to stay there. But also, we actually discovered that although they were not coming as many across the border, they were still leaving the war zone in big numbers, traveling west, stopping at the border in those places that I've mentioned, Chernovtsi and others, but they decided not to cross the border. They decided to stay in their country, uh, but yet close enough to the border just in case the situation escalates so that they can cross the border in a couple of hours or so. So that happened a few weeks ago when the number of refugees started to drop. And we were asked these questions before. What do we expect? We don't know what we expect. Putin is a very unpredictable guy. We do not know what he has in his mind. But as of today, I've just received a text message from the border from our volunteers there, and they informed me that today was a very busy day at the border.
Interesting.
So it may be connected with the events that you've just mentioned, with their bombing starting again around Kiev and in those areas. So all I can say that today the border was very very busy.
So it's just kind of an ebb and flow depending on what is happening politically, and you're right. I mean, if anyone could get into Putin's mind, that would be great. But obviously, uh, it's crazy. So um, let me kind of ask just a couple of last questions here. And Pastor, thank you so much for your time this morning and spending so much time with me. It's like I said, I was excited to talk with you because I knew you had gone into Ukraine and seen it firsthand. Um, what is the greatest need that that you're still seeing in Ukraine? So for obviously supplies are still much needed. Are there any specifics though? If there was a CEO of a big company here in the United States that happened to tune into this podcast and said, "Oh, well, yes, we manufacture that. We could send a lot of that." What are a couple of things that you would say that are in great demand or great need?
Well, I have asked these questions myself to the Ukrainians, to the Ukrainian pastors, and every time I go there, we ask them, "What do you need? What is the greatest need?" So, as of this moment, the need, the greatest need remains that of food,
Okay.
um, non-perishable food, medicine, toiletries, and money. Um, Traveling into Ukraine, I was able to see long, long lines at petrol stations. Some petrol stations were completely empty, and we soon concluded that those that were empty had no fuel to sell, but those who were very busy had fuel to sell. So um, very few that were open, and those who were open had long, long queues of cars waiting to get fuel. The prices went up, um, so uh, Ukrainians um, are finding it difficult to provide for their families, for the refugees, food and basic other items. So, if anyone wants to help out, and if he's in the position of sending food, any kind of food, we sent out rice, sugar, uh, wheat flour, corn flour, um, uh, pasta, uh, meat, canned meat, meat, canned vegetables, canned fruit, or tinned uh, meat or so. Um, if anybody is in a position of sending this out, they will be very, very much appreciated. Some of this food ends up in the hands of soldiers in the war zone. Um, so yeah, there's a lot to be said about that, but that's the basic information. Uh, but I will not close before I say that the greatest need, and you'd appreciate me saying that, is not the physical need, is not the material need. Yes, they need food to to survive. They need funds to be able to provide for their families. But as Christians, as pastors, we believe that their greatest need is the gospel, is the Bible, is the message of salvation. So I'm in discussion right now with the president of the Romanian Association of Churches in Ukraine, and we are trying to arrange a project through which pastors from Romania will be crossing the border into Ukraine, and we will be involved in preaching the gospel around churches, open air, anywhere is needed. We've done already a lot of humanitarian work, which is still needed and very much appreciated, but we want to give something more important. We want to give hope, faith. We want to offer salvation through Christ, and we do that by preaching. As I said, our pastors will be going to preach over there. We want to take Bibles with us in Ukrainian, New Testaments, tracts, anything that can be used for people to understand that that is what they actually need. So, if you want to pray for this project, please do so. If you want to participate, again, please do so. Um, these are the things that the Lord put on our hearts to do, and we pray that He will help us to do them
So you're
faithfully.
taking the bread of wheat and the bread of life together and sharing. So that's amazing. Well, Pastor, I'd like for us to close with one story. What is one story that comes to mind? And I'm sure you've got a million of them, but what's one story that just sticks out that for me, it's the faces of the children. It's the faces. If there's one thing that just tears through me, it's seeing these kids. I believe even at one of your distribution centers, there was it looked like maybe a mom with a baby and maybe some teenage children. Um, I just can't imagine what they're going to have. the memories that they're going to have. What's a story that sticks out to you that you just say, yeah, when I think about this, this is what reminds me. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
There is one story that comes to my mind right now. It's probably not the greatest, but that's the one that I can remember right now. The very first family that I picked up at the border, I was there only to see, I was there only to get informed. It was the first time I went to the border. I was not prepared to be involved. I just wanted to assess, to evaluate, and then pray about it and see how the Lord will have me used in this situation. But as I was watching the crowds coming in, there was a pastor friend of mine who said, "Do you have some extra seats in your car? There's a family here that needs to be taken to a refugee shelter. Can you do that?" And I did have all the car available. There's nobody else with me. There was a woman, a lady with her two children. And as a pastor, I straight away thought, well, I don't normally take women in my car if my wife is not with
Right.
me, driving with me. Uh, shall I do it? Shall I not do it? And then I said, well, it's a crisis, it's a war. Uh, I will certainly do it. So I took this young lady with her two children to my car. Yes, I do remember men very suspiciously inviting that woman to come with them, promising her free accommodation, free food, free transportation. I tried to warn that lady not to respond to those invitations. She unfortunately wasn't able to understand because I was speaking English. She wasn't speaking English. I wasn't able to speak Ukrainian. So anyway, we managed. I managed to take her to my car. I explained to her that I was a pastor. She should not be afraid. She should trust me. I'm going to take her to a shelter for her to be provided for, and so on. And she kind of understood that, but because from the border to this shelter was almost an hour drive, halfway through she started to panic and she started to ask me where I am taking
Mm.
her. Why is it taking so long? Who is it going to be there? What's going to happen to her and her children? And that's when struck me that she started to worry about her safety. Uh, Here she was, yes, happy that she left uh, the war, uh, but all of a sudden, in a car with a stranger, somebody she has never met, and a journey that it doesn't stop, and she was concerned and worried for herself and for her children. And again, as I said, it's not probably the greatest story I can share with you, but that was one of my first interactions with Ukrainian family, and I could just sense the fear in that woman's mind. Um, I cannot imagine what she thought, but I think that's what she had in her mind. So I try to calm her down to just remind her that I'm a pastor. I want to help her. I want to take her to a good place. But she wasn't able to be calmed down, and I had to phone somebody who was able to speak Ukrainian to help me out, and that brother um, was able to help her understand that she's in good hands. And then when we arrived at the shelter, she was relieved and she was very happy and she was very, very thankful, grateful, and that was a good experience for me. And I thought I would share it with you.
That's amazing. And when you think about those stories, that stories, that you just shared, and how many other stories were like that, people completely displaced in the matter of literally hours, with very little. And all they know is they're trying to get across a border out of a war zone. But after that, they don't know where they're going. Some may, but I would probably say the majority don't. They're just trying to get to safety and try to get someplace where they can figure it out, have a time to eat and think and clean up and did you ever find out what happened to her? Did she make it to a destination or?
Yes, she did.
Good.
Yes, she did. She was able to be in touch with some friends in Western Europe, and I'm not sure exactly what her destination was. I cannot remember, Germany or Austria, somewhere. So she was able to make it, but I'm sure they're busy with their lives, and we didn't exchange phone numbers in order to keep in touch. But there were so many. There's so many situations like this. I can think of a family with 11 children who were on the way to our shelter, but their car broke down in the middle of the night, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and they couldn't make it to us. But God provided for them somebody in the middle of the night to offer them help to fix their cars, to provide accommodation, food, and then of course they didn't need to come up to us anymore. They went on to the final destination. Uh, we had a mother who was pregnant, and with a baby with a broken leg, and we were so happy to take care of them and to help them. Um, many other stories. We need to do at least 10 other podcasts to share with you all the stories that we
Well, I
have.
would love that, and I would love to talk with some of your Ukrainian pastors as well, if there's an opportunity there. I want to just talk for a moment to the listeners of the podcast, and you just heard firsthand from someone, from Pastor Catalin, who has been, there. He has gone across the border. He has seen the needs firsthand. Um, yeah, I'm not even going to ask about the video that I saw where there were air raid sirens going off while you were filming. Uh, I was Jen sent me that video. She's like, "Yeah, take a listen to this," and I'm hearing air raid sirens, and you're standing somewhere just filming. I'm like, "Okay, look, if there's air raid sirens going off, I'm running." I mean, we get tornado sirens here in Texas, and I run. So, uh, but I want to.
Yeah, I, that was very unexpected. I didn't expect those sirens to go off. I thought we were in a safe zone, and I was quite uh, surprised and even scared when I heard that sirens. Um, but yeah, I filmed it. Thankfully, nothing happened, but it was scary.
Well, so I just want to encourage again those listeners who have heard these stories. Uh, get involved. Get involved. If there's one thing I hope you heard, it's that prayer. Please be praying for these pastors. Obviously, praying for the refugees, but be praying for the pastors too. The pastors who are giving so much of their time. They're not only having to shepherd their herd back home, their flock back home, and their Sunday service, but then they're adding all of these other responsibilities on. And so if you're listening and you're I encourage you to pray for them, pray for their teams and their staff, that they're able to find supernatural rest when they can rest, and supernatural energy when they need that supernatural energy. And if you're in a position, as I've said on so many of these podcasts, where you can get involved, please do so. Please get involved. As you heard, the smallest of gifts, can go and buy some canned vegetables. It can buy something that can truly help someone. So, I know a lot of people look and say, well, I can't fill up a Sprinter van worth of food and send it over. But what you can do is you can help provide a little bit, and all that little bit adds up to where we can continue to keep these resources flowing across the border and helping. So Pastor Catalin, in closing, what would you say to pastors here in the United States? Just what would you tell them? Again, 103 days in, we just celebrated Easter. Most pastors are kind of going on their summer. I don't know how they do it in Romania, but here in the U.S., a lot of pastors kind of take their sabbatical during summertime because it slows down a little bit. Um, what would you tell pastors here in the United States how they can help?
First of all, I would like to thank them. I want to thank them for the help that they've already provided, either financially or in prayer. Um, yes, it's been really moving and touching to see American people and pastors and churches get involved in this crisis. I know very well that right now you are facing your own challenges and your own problems in America, but you are an example to us. You're a model to follow. The way you have stepped out to the task and uh, helped and prayed, it's been incredible, and we give thanks to the Lord for your faithfulness. Please continue to do so. If the Lord puts it on your heart, and if the Holy Spirit leads you in continuing to do that uh, work, it will be very, very much appreciated and greatly rewarded by the Lord. So please encourage your churches to pray, um, to give if possible. Um, uh, why not pay us a visit? Come and work with us. Come and welcome the refugees at the border. If you have the courage and the possibility to cross cross into Ukraine with us, you'll be more than welcome. Um, Not that you need to do so, but it will be a great experience and a great way to to serve the Lord, and not only blessing those people, but you'll be blessed. You'll be blessed by doing so. So let the Lord guide you, and let the Holy Spirit lead you into what He thinks best you should do. And Romanian people, Ukrainian people will be forever grateful.
Well, Pastor Catalin, I really, really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your heart and your team as they have reached out to help so many people. And we are going to continue praying for peace, and that Ukraine's military continues to fight the good fight. As I told the pastor the other day, it's kind of reminds me of the David and Goliath story, but we know who won that. So you guys are in our prayers, and I just want to thank you for taking the time tonight your time to share a little bit with us, and we look forward to hearing the amazing things that God is going to do through your evangelical efforts once you guys are able to get over there and have those open air meetings and share the faith and distribute the Bibles, and that's the bread of life. That's what people need right now. And you can't share the gospel if someone's stomach's growling, but once they're fed, then it's time to go in and do the spiritual work and really um, you know let them know this is what moves you and drives you to do what you do. It's the presence and power of God. So thank you so much, Pastor. We look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Thank you very much, Sean, to you and to your wife, Jennifer, for the work that you are doing. May the Lord richly,
Thank you.
richly bless you.
Thank you, Pastor. Sean here. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like, a follow, and a share. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, consider giving it 5 stars. I look forward to sharing the next story with you real soon.